Good morning and welcome to another special edition of Added Time, the football podcast you never knew you needed. Today we'll be talking about the ups and downs of the Scottish top flight, as well as discussing all the winners and losers of the lower leagues. Joining me today in the studio is BBC Sport presenter and commentator Lewis Irons. Lewis, thanks very much for taking your time out of your busy schedule.
Not a problem, mate. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, the show, as always, is sponsored by AO Home Improvements, your one-stop shop for all your renovations and projects around the house. So get online, give them a check out, guys. Drop them a message. Lewis, let's get into it. The season's just ended, albeit there's a cup final to be decided. Celtic or Rangers could win the double. But Celtic were crowned champions at Rugby Park. What was your take on the run-in, probably the last 8 games? Who did you think was going to have the kind of bottle and the confidence to go and take the title?
I think first and foremost that, you know, as a relative neutral in that regard, it was just a great title run-in generally. It's good to see it be close. You know, nobody really enjoys it unless you're of one side or the other, or your team's romping away with it. But for it to be so tightly contested right up towards the end was entertaining. But I think, you know, there's a reason that Celtic have won 12 of the last 13, isn't there? They do just have the knack of getting it, and they've got obviously such a good core of players, you know, led by the captain Callum McGregor. He's a phenomenal player for both club and country, and I think there was a period where Rangers made everyone think that they could go on and do it, but I think Celtic always have the kind of majority would believe that they would be the ones to go on and do it. They've been there and done it so many times recently, and so it showed as well. And I think players like McGregor, who I just touched on, but particularly that midfield of Hatate, O'Reilly, McGregor, when they kind of clicked towards the last few games and they were all playing regularly, it was just a class above anyone. So I think I always thought Celtic would get the job done, and so it showed.
Yeah, and I think because a lot of the Rangers fans were making out, you know, obviously you look back in the games at Dundee and Ross County in particular, you know, I think that was games they probably expected to go and win and go clear of Celtic and push on and win the title. That didn't happen. But when you look at, I think Celtic and Rangers' inconsistencies this season has probably been, it's been a while since you've seen a season where both teams have been so poor at certain stages of the season.
So it's not like something you normally associate with either of them, is there? That vulnerability that they could drop points. Nobody saw the Dingwall result coming, did they?
Yeah.
But I think there was still an element of, there could be more twists. And I think maybe that's why there was still a little bit of doubt, even though it was in Celtic's hands after Rangers slipped up. There was still the thought Celtic could go to Kelly, for example, and prove to be too much like Kelly. They could get a result, as they had done twice this season against Celtic. But when it mattered, like the performance from Celtic, I was down at Rugby Park working, and they were far too good for any team, really, the way they played that day. And it just shows you when they kind of get into that point, they do click into another kind of gear, don't they? So it'll be really interesting, and I think for next season, hopefully it can be a similar kind of title race and that it can be close, and hopefully Rangers can make it that bit closer to go right up until the very last day, just purely for the entertainment value. But I think there's a lot of work needing done at Rangers, and to be honest, I think it could be huge summers for both of them, and the likes of, you know, Hearts, who would look to maybe just narrow that gap from second down.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think some of the Hearts recruitment, you know, some of the players that they've got coming in on pre-contracts, really, really shrewd business that can just bridge that gap slightly. I don't see them getting much closer in terms of the money that Celtic and Rangers will have and the way that they can operate compared to other clubs. But I think, Hearts in particular, their recruitment's good. Kelly, exciting to see what they do. But heading into next season, it'll be exciting. And I mean, can you see it being another tight one yourself, or what do you reckon?
I think that the fact that obviously the Champions League money, I think, was vital.
Yeah, exactly.
For Celtic, I think they'll kind of bank that. Whether how much they spend, I'm not too sure, but I do think Rangers will obviously need to make kind of wholesale changes. I know they've already been busy supposedly in acquiring players. So I think Celtic could probably push on, and it might take Rangers a wee bit longer just to rebuild, but I think they've definitely got the right guy at the helm kind of thing. Obviously the season started back in August and it was Celtic minus Ange Postecoglou, which a lot of fans were still trying to get over and try and comprehend. Brendan Rodgers came back to the club from Leicester so soon. Were you surprised that he came back from the Premiership so soon?
At the time, a little bit, I think you don't really see it all that often in modern football, do you? That managers will go back to a place that they've, let's be honest, you know, burnt a lot of bridges the way that he left. There's no sugarcoating that. It was something that went down really badly with the fans, just the timing of his departure. And of course, you know, I think when you're so successful for a club, you can never really leave and be like all round popular and happy with all the fans. But I thought the manner in which he left would have made it too sour a place for him to come back to. But I think that has to go to give him a bit of credit for actually having the confidence in himself to take the job on. And, you know, he's always going to back himself to turn people around. And he's probably done that pretty quickly. I think he's still got a bit of work to do with some, you know, like the hardcore support will still need a little bit more time. The cup final you touched on at the start is probably one of the perfect ways to maybe get a few more round, isn't it, against the biggest rivals. But I mean, that's going to be another dramatic game and a dramatic day. I think we'll probably touch on it, but going into games like that, similar to the title running, I think your gut just says Celtic generally have the upper hand in these big occasions. They seem to get the job done, and it's easy to say that just given the amount of titles and trophies they've won in the last few seasons. But I think going back to Rodgers there, I was surprised for sure. But I'm not surprised that he is winning people back quite quickly, because he is obviously a top tier manager. There's no getting away from that.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, Ross County came to town, the flag got unfurled, and Malky Mackay's side actually put in a really good performance that day, despite being 3-0 down. They're probably harsh to be 3-0 down on the day, because they caused Celtic a lot of problems, and obviously the game finished 4-2. Were you surprised when you watched? I mean, I know teams can have a great start to the season, but when you look at their perilous position now.
Yeah, I mean, see, to be honest, last season, it was the season before last when County snuck into the top half, I think, didn't they? And I remember from the first half of that season, they barely won a game. But every time I watched County, I thought they were absolutely excellent under Malky Mackay. They were a really, really good side. And you fancied them to get out of bother, and to then obviously get the top half was incredible. I thought Malky Mackay did a great job generally up there. They've obviously got good money compared to other teams around, you know, that kind of stature of club. But the recruitment was good. Malky Mackay did a great job. And then, given where they are now, I think, I fancy them again, though, to get the job done in the playoffs. I think it's just so weighted in favour of the Premiership team, isn't it? But it's just a lot for the Championship team that get into the playoffs to get that many games under their belt and get over the line. But I wasn't surprised to see County push Celtic pretty close and give them a good game on that opening day. But I mean, I think, you know, County have slipped gradually, and Don Cowie's done an okay job when he's took charge, but it was just kind of too little too late, and nobody really saw St Johnstone salvaging something either so dramatically late in the season. But yeah, County, I think on their day are still a good team, and I think they'll probably get enough in the ranks there to get the job done in the playoffs, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, obviously, if the Celtic fans went away from Celtic Park that day feeling a wee bit unsure about the team's performance, we're losing 2 goals, their mood would have definitely been lightened later on that day with Kilmarnock obviously beating Rangers, surprisingly probably. Derek McInnes, he's had such a fantastic season for Kilmarnock.
Yeah, he's been incredible. I know like a few Kelly fans, neutrals and all sorts have kind of asked the question, is this as good an achievement as what Clark did with Kelly? And a lot of them would say yes, and a lot of them do think it is. Some maybe still would sway towards the Clark era a little bit more, but I think the job that Derek McInnes has done has been absolutely incredible. He's, again, it's just intriguing when a team does so well about what will happen in the summer and how they can kick off from there. I think Derek McInnes will kind of be aware that he'll end up losing 1 or 2, or, you know, just the nature of clubs at that level, the turnover can be quite big with player contracts and players wanting to move on. So how he kind of kicks on from here will be the interesting thing. I think St Mirren are another team that could kick on next season as well, but there's just so many kind of interesting narratives going into next season off the back of what we've seen. But for me, Derek McInnes, a deserving kind of manager of the season. And yeah, that probably surprised a few people as well. I don't think, you know, too many people would have tipped Kelly to be comfortably the 4th in the league. So it does have a lot of credit has to go to Derek and his coaching staff. Given that he also, you know, lost one of his most trusted coaches in Tony Docherty, and how he might adapt to that.
Well he's done it,
exactly, and then look
well.
at what he's done exactly. So I think credit to McInnes for managing so well this season without Tony, and getting that 4th spot in European football. Brilliant for Kelly.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, you mentioned St Mirren, another team that had a great season. When you look at it, they're probably the only other team outside Celtic and Rangers that spent some time at the top of the league, which is incredible. They had a fantastic season, and obviously they didn't they didn't taste defeat until Rangers came to town when they beat them 3-0. And you know, as you say, is it a case of they weren't far away, maybe from even fourth spot, so you know they can push on. What do you think they need to do in terms of obviously adding to the squad, but keeping the core of players that they already have there?
Yeah, keeping the core of players is crucial, isn't it? I think one of the big things will be keeping the manager as well. I mean, the job he's done, I don't know, maybe he goes under the radar sometimes in terms of getting overlooked for some jobs. Maybe it's given that when he moved down south to Morecambe, it didn't quite work out. Maybe that reputation's still hanging over him a little bit. But for me, he's one of the best managers in the country. And I mean, back-to-back top 6 finishes with St Mirren is remarkable for a club of that size, and all St Mirren fans would agree with that, wouldn't they? But I think keeping Stephen Robinson will be crucial. The club's going in a really good direction generally. I think off the pitch, people like Keith Lassie, I worked with Keith Lassie when I was at Motherwell, and he's just doing a really good job off the pitch as well. So it's exciting, and I think keeping the core will be key, keeping the manager will be key, but I think that'll be a big challenge, because as soon as money comes in or offers come in at clubs of that stature, it's just the nature of it. You kind of lose players so often, and that's just part and parcel of being successful when you're a club that's not really expected to punch above its weight too often. So it'll be really interesting summer for them for sure.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, September started with first Glasgow derby of the season, and Celtic unfancied, it has to be said, going to Ibrox without Carter Vickers, without Rio Hattati, and without any fans. What is your take on the whole fan situation? I know it's changing next year. It's going to 5%, which I'm delighted about. I would have the full allocation, to be honest, because I think it's absolutely killed the derby in recent years, kind of thing. And that
it's weird, isn't it? I think we'll look back on some of these games and highlights of, like, you know, just thinking of the most recent one at Ibrox when Celtic, obviously the 3-3 game, it was a brilliant game.
Yeah.
How much better that could have been with the normal regular allocation, because it was quite unique, wasn't it? When I remember specifically when Adam Ida scored, it's just quite surreal watching it happen with no noise, and it's quite unique.
Like a silence,
it's quite unique, and it is, you know, a one-off, but nobody likes that. So I think it'll be strange looking back on those kind of highlights over the years, because rightly so, it's moving in the right direction. I think the majority of fans of both sides want it back as well, don't they? Let's be honest. Certainly Scottish football needs it back, because it makes the derby, it's the showcase game. It's what the world generally watches. Everyone knows that. So for it to be the best spectacle it can be is crucial. And I mean, we've got a timely reminder of what it could be like this weekend in the cup final, when it's going to be 50-50. That's what it's all about, isn't it? So really looking forward to this weekend, but more importantly, looking forward to seeing away fans get back in there, because that's how it should be.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, not without drama. VAR, obviously they're called into that first game, and you know, Cyril Dessers thought he'd fed Kemar Roofe to fire Rangers ahead. The stadium's absolutely rocking, but then they go to the monitor and they find out it's a foul.
Yeah,
I always think when you look at the types of fouls, I always think they almost shouldn't be fouls. Yeah, because you know, if a player's coming in for behind, I think it's unlucky. Yeah, you know, I think it's just a really unlucky decision to go against you. You've seen penalties given as well. Yeah,
it's one of them, isn't it? Like, I think it probably splits opinion on what people want that to be, but I think just the laws of the game now, it was the right decision, wasn't it, ultimately, to the law, and that's the most important thing fundamentally. But the way the game is going, you either kind of love it or hate it, don't you?
I think if you're a Celtic fan, you're calling it a free kick. If you're a Rangers fan, you're absolutely fuming.
Exactly, that's the nature of it, isn't it? That's football in general. It's funny the things you'll cheer for or call for your own team, but I think VAR in general is an interesting one, isn't it? Because ultimately, if you look at the facts of it, they are getting more things right. Whether they're taking too long to get these decisions, whether they're looking at things they shouldn't be looking at, whether it's just nitpicking is, you know, another subject. But they are fundamentally getting more decisions right. But it's taking away the enjoyment for a lot of people. Yeah. So it's like,
sometimes you're celebrating goals twice, and sometimes you're having that heartbreak of getting a goal taken away from you, a penalty. I think because the problem obviously down south is the clubs are starting to kind of revolt against it.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, I don't think it needs taken away. I think it needs maybe suspended over the close season.
Yeah.
And reworked on. just start again from scratch. Because I think that what it was brought in for was obviously to stop arguments, and what all it's done is cause arguments. I think they're trying to re-referee the game too much.
Yeah.
And a lot of referees are dependent on it because they know if they make a mistake, somebody's gonna pick it up, kind of thing.
It's weird, isn't it? It's because the technology is not actually the issue; it's the way that it's been used, isn't it? And I think FIFA actually put a release out last week or something saying that they were going to trial, like almost like in tennis where you have an appeal, like 3 appeals, like the Hawkeye, and use that for VAR, kind of lower level football, and just trial it over the next wee while and see if it works. I think that would be a really interesting way of going about it, because if you only had 3 appeals in a game,
you need to use them.
You need to use them smartly. You're not just going to waste them, are you? And it would keep the game moving a bit more. And then it's also kind of on the team to manage their calls themselves. So it would make it a little bit more interesting, I think. I don't mind the thought of that at all, because I think as well we're seeing a lot injuries as well that kind of were a bit freakish for a while with all these kind of pauses in play. You think about the intensity of a football game. You're running around, say, for an hour, and then all of a sudden there's a 5-minute stoppage for a VAR delay. You've seen sometimes even in the Premier League, like really long delays.
Yeah.
And then immediately later you're back to full intensity and people are pulling hamstrings, muscles. It's just not right that it can be so long for decisions and stuff.
Absolutely.
So I think the appeal type thing would be keep the game moving a bit quicker, less stoppages, and that would be good.
Yeah, because when you're looking at games, sometimes now are lasting like close to 2 hours.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's and that's why obviously players are more injury prone. I think I'd like to see a kind of trial of when they done the Women's World Cup. I think it was the last Women's World Cup, and they had the referees mic'd up, and they would go to the monitor, they would come back, and they would tell the full stadium how they came to the decision, what the decision was. Because I think a lot of the fans would go, right, that's why they've given it.
Totally.
Because I think something like that needs to be, as long as you obviously can't hear the players talking to the ref, because that could be a problem. Then.
I know. I think the communication is probably the big gripe for fans, isn't it? Unfortunately, it's just the nature of the top flight at the minute is that not all clubs have big screens or ways that they can actually communicate what's happening the same way they do with infinite funds in England compared to up here. That's nobody's fault, really. It's just circumstance with the kind of lack of money that is there in the infrastructure. So that is a big gripe. So if that can be streamlined as well, like if VAR were to get used less, would that save a little bit of money? Could they then put that money into improving things like that? Who knows? That's a call and a decision for clubs and people at the top to make. But I think, I agree with you. There's something that needs reworked. I think everybody is in agreement with that, to be honest. Nothing's perfect, and there's certainly improvements that can be made. So hopefully it will go in the right direction. But I just can't see it getting scrapped entirely. I mean, I know that clubs are talking about that in England, aren't they? I just can't see it going back the way, because now that it's here, I just don't see it getting scrapped entirely. That'd be strange. But
and obviously, one of the other teams that did well in September was Hibs under the stewardship of Nick Montgomery, albeit David Gray took the reins after Lee Johnson left the club. It's been a bit of a poison chalice, that Hibs job. Do you think that puts managers off coming to take that job because they're not really getting the time? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, if you're a manager looking at a club, you're going to look at the track record of the recent ones, and it's been a really bad few seasons for Hibs. I mean, 4 managers in the last 3 or 4 seasons at least, I think. So it's strange, and I'm not sure where the kind of issue lies there, if it's the recruitment fundamentally or what. But I mean, there are really good players at Hibs, and every time they have brought coaches in, they do have either a decent track record or a decent enough reputation that you think this could be the one. I mean, Jack Ross, go back to his spell, he actually did a great job with Hibs, didn't he? And then kind of things fell apart, and they were quite quick to act. So the time is the thing, like you touch on. If you're not getting given the time, then what chance have you got? Managers they need time. They really do.
Yeah, I felt sorry for Sean Maloney at the time. When you look at what he could have done, I think his time at Belgium could have been really vital for Hibs. I think he could have really done something with him, but just didn't get the time. Obviously spoke about Kilmarnock earlier in the show, and 19-year-old David Watson has had an absolute whirlwind of a season. One PFA player, Young Player of the Year. He really had to beat some top names, especially like Sir Lennon Miller and Lyle Cameron, kind of thing. How impressed have you been with players in that squad, like Mally Watkins and David Watson?
Really, really impressed. And again, if you go back to the start of the season and you kind of look at those names, you're not really thinking that they're going to do much, really. You think it's steady kind of top flight team. There, you know, Marley Watkins has always been a steady top flight kind of player, but you didn't see him having the kind of season he's had. But they are all just clicking and playing so well together. David Watson, credit to McInnes for like giving him a chance and sticking with him and giving him a good run of games. I mean, he's obviously snatched the chance with both hands with these performances, but I think, you know, fair play to Kelly all round for that, because he's absolutely flying, isn't he? You can see in a few seasons, if he either stays at Kelly or moves on, whatever it may be, he's going to kind of force his way into like Scotland international kind of scene with these performances. Him and Lennon Miller, these guys, there's exciting youth kind of coming up in that regard. So impressive, and it's the manner of some of his goals as well, isn't it? I mean, I remember it was up at Pittodrie in particular. He scored the winning goal kind of late on, the touch on the spin, and then
I think he's had a couple of great solo runs kind of thing for goals.
Not just the numbers, but the quality of them as well. He's what a season he's had.
I think he scored at Celtic Park. I think he scored a late equaliser at Celtic Park as well.
So great season, and a deserved player of the year. I think Lennon Miller probably could have or would have pushed him closer had he not been out for that kind of period in the middle with injury, because he was on a similar, if not higher, trajectory at one point until he was just absolutely electric for Motherwell. So next season with the two of them kind of fully fit, maybe getting full seasons under their belts, could be another interesting one for the Young Player Award.
Yeah, and it'll be obviously good for obviously Scotland in the future kind of thing. You know, Livingston are a team obviously that they're gone now after a long stay in the Premier League. They've been predominantly a tough team to beat, almost that I used to call them the Stoke City of Scottish football. They were very tough to beat, and David Martindale done a great job in his time there. In terms of you know, what do they need to do? I know they've released, I think, up to 10 players. You know, some players big players like Bruce Anderson, Jack Hamilton, Joel Newbley, Andrew Shinnie, among others. How do you then rebuild? Do you go through youth, or do you go through experience in the lower divisions to get you out of there?
I think a blend of the two, actually. I don't see them being able to have too many kind of mid-range kind of players in their peak on big earning, like big salaries respective to Livingston. So they're probably going to need to go for guys that are a bit more tried and tested at championship level, but just back the youth to come in and kind of have a nice blend there. I think that's probably the way they'll look to go. They've always been decent at bringing through some young players as well, Livingston, every now and again. So I think if they give them a bit of a chance, they might reap the rewards of it. But it's going to be really tough for Olivia, I think, to have survived, and not just survived, but like thrived in the top flight for a few years, getting top half quite regularly. And to then go down into what's going to be another difficult division, like some of the teams in the championship next season, it'll be really competitive, won't it? Like if County go down, for example, they've got a huge budget, they could bounce straight back up. Wraith are kind of going strength to strength, aren't they? Thistle are always kind of in there and about there, so it's going to be a difficult championship for Livy. And I mean, look at Accies, for example, they're kind of easy comparison, aren't they? When Accies survived for so long in the top flight, when they went down, they've found it a bit of a struggle, haven't they?
Slipped down the divisions,
So wouldn't be surprised to see Livy go in a similar way. But I mean, what they do have again is a good manager, a really good manager at Premiership level in Martindale, who's done a really good job, and will inevitably stay at Livy. He's Mr. Livingston, isn't he? So he'll be desperate to kind of do the job there and try and get them straight back up, but it'll be a massive task, that.
Yeah, and obviously when you look at, you know, Celtic Rangers obviously in Europe this year, and then you look at the other two teams in Europe, in Hearts and Aberdeen. Aberdeen obviously had some big results, and obviously had pushed Frankfurt, who were Europa League finalists just the season before. You know, in terms of, do you think that kind of derailed Aberdeen season? I know it had the opposite effect on Hearts season. They pushed on after Europe and claimed third, but do you think that definitely had a reverse effect on Aberdeen? Yeah,
you've hit the nail on the head for me. I think that totally unravelled Aberdeen's entire season, to be honest. Because it was the performances were really good in Europe, and they were tiring, grueling performances against really top teams that they just seemed to be incapable of recovering from those games kind of week to week. And as soon as you hit a rut of kind of defeats or dropping points, it's hard to get out of a rut, no matter how good a team you are. Like Aberdeen have shown that, because I mean, every week, bar maybe Livingston this season, every game is a really tricky game in the Scottish top flight, isn't it? Livy even proved it with a couple of surprise results when it looked like they were just going to be totally miles away. But I mean, every week when you're going up against a team who've had a fresh kind of week full time to prepare, and you're come off the back of a lot of travel,
you're
tough
playing a
games,
Thursday, Sunday.
It's difficult. So, and it took them a while to get out of that, but I think they've shown. I mean, Miovski is obviously the star of that team, but when you see what they did in the cups, that just shows you how good a team they are and the way they've ended the season. They've been comfortable in the end. So I see them kicking on next season completely. It'll be really interesting with the new manager, Jimmy Thielen, to see what he's like as well and what kind of football they'll play at Aberdeen. I think fans might get caught up in the style of football or whatever.
Yeah.
All they need to do is just start winning games regularly from the off, because they should be pushing and contesting for that third spot with Hearts easily. And hopefully, like I said, at the top, try to narrow that gap between second and the rest, because you don't like seeing that gulf, do you?
Do you think it was harsh on Aberdeen releasing, getting rid of Barry Robson, then considering, he got in the cup final, he had them in Europe? And
I think so, and more so because of the fact that they didn't clearly have somebody in mind for the long term.
Ready, yeah.
The Warnock situation was so strange, wasn't it?
I thought it was farcical, to be honest.
Like, I can see why the club brought him in.
Yeah.
And again, I think the appointment split people 50-50, because when you've got a manager of that experience that's worked at the level he has, you're thinking he'll come in and he'll get them firing up and he'll save them and it'll work. It looked like it made sense. But then at the same time, if you've got a manager like Robson who has done what he's done in the Cups in particular, like, do you give him that chance? Has he earned it a little bit? And he probably just in their mind hadn't earned it because he hadn't got that credit in the bank.
I think the league form let him down.
It let him down, didn't it? And I think ultimately they had that because it was plummeting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it was scary for a while for Aberdeen. They would have been nervy fans up there, but I think they had to probably change it just because of the way it was going. But again, like I said, the fact that they didn't have clearly somebody lined up at that time surprised me that they went for it a little bit. But credit to Peter Leaven as well. What a job he's done. And again, I think it was never going to happen that they were going to do the same thing with Robson. No matter how well Leaven did, they were never going to give him the job full time. I don't think they could afford to go down that route again. So be really intriguing, because let's be honest, not many know about Thielen that much. He's kind of coming in as an unknown, which can work for you or against you coming into Scottish football, can't it? So it'll be really intriguing to see what he brings to Aberdeen.
I think they know they need to get it right this time. They absolutely need to get it bang on right, and obviously time will tell. For me, the Neil Warnock one, as I say, was a strange one. I've always respected Neil Warnock as a manager, but in terms of when he came up here, I felt he came up here almost on a holiday, as if to go, I'm up here for. He actually said, I'm up here for 4 months. I'm not going to get sacked. Ironically, it came back to bite him.
Fast forward a couple of months.
He just, I didn't think he ever took Scottish football serious. I think he probably found it harder than what he thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? Because he had all the makings of being a great addition to Scottish football. A big name, entertaining, good value.
Yeah.
But he almost just morphed into the kind of caricature of himself that you all think about.
Yeah.
It was every week, it was no matter results, you were kind of getting funny clips in the press conferences and stuff, because he knew he wasn't getting it long term. So maybe that was the thing. If he thought he might have had a chance at the long term, would we have seen a different scenario? Who knows? But I mean, it doesn't take away from anything he's done in his career. Warnock, obviously, like you say, brilliant manager, by all accounts as well, a really, really nice guy. But it just didn't work out the way it was supposed to. And I think that's, if that falls on Aberdeen, Warnock, everyone involved. It just didn't marry up the way it was supposed to. But as I said, at the time, it felt like it could have been a smart move.
Yeah,
it just didn't.
I think he's quite happy in Sky Studio now, earning his money, not having that pressure. What's your opinions on the split in the Premiership? Because when you look at the teams who finished in the bottom half, they could have still been pushing for a European place. When you look at Aberdeen, Motherwell and Hibs, could have been 5th, 6th, 7th instead. 6th, 7th, 8th kind of.
I know. I get why the split exists. I get it makes it quite different. It's quite unique, and I think for the size of country and football that we have, trying to do things a bit differently makes sense for the game. But I don't like the split personally, and purely that comes from probably being a Motherwell fan, and like when you realise you've missed out the top 6, having that panic for the remainder of it, just because you could get dragged in. But you're right, because of the importance of European football now in terms of the money that comes in is so big that I think every club should have the opportunity to fight for it right until the final day. And it would make it more interesting as well. I think when it came to the kind of latter stages of this season, we're seeing it more often that there's not a great deal left to kind of play for. The top two are so far in front. Generally at the minute, third and fourth seem to be kind of, well, third in particular. But then having like a 4 or 5 clubs battling to get into that
in
fifth
the middle
spot
of the table,
would be brilliant, wouldn't it? And again, it makes it, you can see how the coverage could be framed to kind of promote that in the final day. If everyone's going for that European spot, it'd be brilliant. So I would personally like to see it change and not have one just for that. But again, it's split opinion.
Do you think then it would? I know we've spoke before about, you know, in terms of the chat before has been an extended league. Do you think? I think the worry with an extended league is obviously who do you invite in, and then how do you make it as strong as you want it to be, kind of thing.
I think an extended league would be great as well. The details of how you get there and all that is obviously quite tricky, as you say, but I think in the long term it would be a better product generally. More teams, different fixtures, you know, it wouldn't be the same because it is quite repetitive sometimes.
Yeah, 4 times a season can be very, very.
So getting away from that little bit more would be valuable. And when you think of some of the clubs, I mean, like you say, like, you know, you couldn't invite teams in, could you? In terms of like one season with 2 teams just immediately come up with no relegation, how would you work it? But you think of some of the size of clubs that aren't in the top flight. You think of Thistle, Dunfermline, Falkirk, you know, a lot of big clubs that would be valuable additions if they were to come up. That in a way, like kind of Dunfermline in particular, like a sleeping giant, aren't they? Like they're a good size of football club on the par with the likes of Motherwell and St Johnstone, all these clubs that are good top flight teams that I think would be great in the top flight. So I would like to see it extend, like you say, but it's one of them. Will we see? It's just hard to see.
I think what you'd have to do is you would have to maybe plan it, and then obviously a couple of years down the line say, right, from this at the start of the season, say whoever finishes in the top 2 and the thing immediately straight up, and then that's the way it's going to stay, kind of thing. Then it becomes a better competition. I think
it becomes a mental season, wouldn't it? Like,
because everybody would be fighting so much harder to get in there, kind of thing. When you look at Celtic, who were unbeaten from the start of the season, despite a couple of slip-ups, draws and things like that, to Motherwell and Hibs, actually had a tough December, you know, lost to Kilmarnock, but obviously lost to Hearts at home. Santa Claus even got booed. I still don't know to this day. What that was about, to be honest. I don't know why he was getting booed, to be honest, because he wasn't even playing.
But then the full circle moment as he comes out at the end of the
trophy,
season.
It was just the most Scottish football, the most Scottish football thing ever, because you can imagine like people down in England watching it going, why is Santa there?
I know. Because for a lot of people it wasn't the biggest story, like you say. Like people in England wouldn't have known all that much about the incident with Santa previously. So they would have been like, what? But yeah, fair play. It was funny in that regard, wasn't it? But yeah, it was a weird kind of period that when he got booed and all, wasn't it? Like it was a wee bit toxic, that's for sure.
But when you look at, you know, Lawrence Shankland was instrumental in Hearts' season, you know, over 30 goals for the season, you know, and Hearts finishing in the top 3. I'd be amazed, firstly, if he's not on that plane to Germany. But do you think he'll feature for Steve Clarke?
He'll almost certainly be in the squad, won't he? Like you can almost guarantee it at the minute with his form, and he's grown in stature as a Scotland player in terms of getting a few more appearances, a start here and there. Will he feature? I think probably more likely in the second and third game.
Coming off the bench maybe.
Exactly. I'll be intrigued I think the Germany game is made for Lyndon Dykes, isn't it? In terms of we're not going to have that much of the ball, but against top teams he's such a handful, and he would be a different challenge for like Rudiger and that. You know, not that they're going to struggle with many players. They're some of the best defenders in the world, but I think Dykes would be a real handful. Obviously Adams kind of doesn't get the credit he deserves, I think, sometimes as a Scotland player. I think he's not going to score every game. No. He's not going to have a remarkable kind of numbers for Scotland, but he does such a good job. But for me, I think Dykes suits the way we play that little bit better for a game like that. And then if we're in the game against Germany, not to get carried away, and you've got a wee sniff with 10-15 to go, that you could see Shankland coming in at that point.
Maybe
an
fresh
instinctive
legs,
goal scorer that could take a chance. So he might feature in the opening game if it were to pan out like that. And then the second and third game, I think, there's a chance he could either come off the bench or start. Who knows?
I think what he's got to do is he's got to feature somewhat in the two friendlies beforehand.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think if he doesn't feature much, then I think he will be in the squad, but I don't see him really coming off the bench and getting ahead of Shea Adams and Lyndon Dykes kind of thing. So where do you see him playing his trade next year in terms of...
Question, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he does eventually get the move to Rangers that was discussed so much, but equally Hearts are in a good position in the sense that, or is he out of contract next summer? Is that
next
right?
year? Yeah, he's still got a year.
It's it's in their hands, isn't it? In the sense that the money needs to be right first and foremost.
Absolutely.
But equally as well, Shankland, I think he'll be at Hearts personally. I don't see Rangers spending the money. But having said that, a team from down south might come in and stump up the cash and he could move. But I've got a feeling he'll have one more season at Hearts and maybe sign with somebody in January on a pre-contract.
Yeah, I was surprised that, because I said in January that I felt he could have been the difference between Celtic or Rangers winning the league or not winning the league. So I'm very surprised that, I don't know if maybe they did go for him and he didn't want to leave Hearts, but I'd be very surprised if it was offers came in and he did reject them. So
I think the reason I think that maybe he'll stay for one more season at Hearts is because Rangers they need to recruit and have a big overhaul this summer, don't they? But when you think of the top end of the pitch, Dessers and Danilo in particular they were quite big signings, big money.
Yeah.
They're not going to get rid of either of those two, are they? They've not done enough to sell or someone come in. So are they going to go and spend more money on another striker, or will they wait and try and get him on a free?
Yeah.
I think maybe towards that, maybe. But who knows? He certainly deserves a move, let's be honest. If you were a Rangers fan, you would be crying out for the club to go get him, wouldn't you?
I could see him maybe going down to a championship club in England.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe like a Millwall or QPR, somebody like that, I think.
I think that's more likely than the Rangers move,
Yeah.
And has he been linked with any championship clubs in the last window? I don't know if there was many clubs mentioned.
I'm not sure if there was any club. I think it's mostly Rangers and Celtic.
So, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you look at Dykes, for example, Tommy Conway, Scottish strikers doing really well in the championship. They'll look at Shankland and think, he could come down here and excel. He could get better numbers, that's for sure. I think Dykes has only got 7 goals in the championship this season. It only paints a certain picture of his game, doesn't it? Because he's not all about the goals. But I think Shankland could easily go down there and be a top player there. So really interesting to see what happens with him, and obviously wish him the best for him and for Scotland, because we need a fit and firing line.
Absolutely. And when we go into Rangers, now under the stewardship of Philippe Clement, he seems to have steadied the ship, obviously, after the Michael Beale saga. Their season was in jeopardy early on with defeats to Kilmarnock, Celtic and Aberdeen. Obviously, the Aberdeen game was the game that lost Michael Beale his job. With Clement coming in and winning that League Cup, obviously he's got the Rangers fans on board. If he doesn't win the Cup on Saturday, then do you think there's pressure right away on him next year in terms of he has to start well?
I think at Celtic and Rangers the pressure's always immense, isn't it? So in a way he's come in and immediately got so many people on side that he's not really felt pressure up until the last few weeks, I would say. Even some of the kind of surprise results, you can kind of feel that he's still fairly early in the job. It's the kind of teething issues. His first full season will be what he's measured on, absolutely. So I think in that regard, he's under pressure from the off to be successful, because that is what the demand is. So if he wins the Scottish Cup, then it buys him a little bit of time. But I think even still, if he wins that, fans will still be expecting a good start to the season, and it's all about the league, isn't it, in that regard? So,
and I think it's obviously trying to get that result against Celtic to get that monkey off his back.
That's the big one now, isn't it? So this weekend will be very interesting one way or the other, because it could shape the two, how they start next season, couldn't it, in many ways. But I think for Clement, it will just be interesting to see how he handles the kind of, because he's always been so calm, cool, collected, and he's been very impressive, hasn't he? So with a little bit more pressure mounting, it kind of tells you what you need to know about managers generally, doesn't it? So it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, and obviously they had a really good December when you look at the results. I think they had wins against Aberdeen, Real Betis, Hearts, and then the only defeat came at the end of the month to Celtic. So how much of a kind of psychological blow would that have been for Clement? Obviously with only being his first derby game.
Of course, it is a psychological. It's damaging, isn't it? That just when you build that much momentum and you think, and it's just undone so quickly, that can be damaging for sure. Because for a long period, it looked like Rangers were the ones that were going to go on and win the league, didn't it? They had the form, they had the momentum, and it was probably going to be shaped on that game in particular. And when it went against them, it just kind of took the wind out the sails a little bit, didn't it? And it almost just kind of gave Celtic the slight nudge they needed towards. I mean, Celtic always seem to like good long distance runners, aren't they? Time their run well and get form at the right time. Whereas Rangers kind of hit form at the wrong time and just kind of stuttered towards the end a little bit. So that would have been a huge blow for them, absolutely.
I think when you look at the players, obviously they're going to the players they've got on loan, obviously going back to their clubs. Fabio Silva, especially. I think he was a player that came up and started to impress. I think Cortez is another one. When you look at, I think he's been unlucky with his injury.
Yeah.
I know Rangers will probably try to get a deal done for him.
Yeah.
Do you see there being kind of wholesale changes in that squad, or do you see any of the loan players that's been there? Do you think any of them will sign up for another year or two?
I think Sima would be a really interesting one, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
If they were to get him permanent, because he's shown obviously the injury kind of derailed his season a little bit, but when he's played, he looks to stand out.
A lot of goals, yeah.
He's young. Brighton don't need the money. They can demand a good fee. I think the fact he has done so well up here will just add to the fee that they can ask for.
Yeah.
I can't see Brighton selling for a fee that Rangers would pay, to be honest. I think Brighton would easily turn around and say, well, we'll try and get 20 million quid for him from a team in Europe else, somewhere. Yeah. That wouldn't surprise me. And obviously Rangers aren't going to spend that sort of money on one player, so as much as they'd love to. But I think if they could get him, that would be massive, because he is a player that takes him to another level.
He could have been the difference.
Yeah. If he didn't get injured, I think he could have been. I think he is that important and that good for them. Unlike Silva, for example, who, nothing against him, but I'm not overly impressed. I don't think he's...
I think his antics, I think
he's probably alienated a lot of fans as well.
Got too much into his head, Yeah. And Todd Cantwell, obviously, is another player that comes in for a lot of criticism.
Yeah.
Not just from opposing fans now, but Rangers fans, I think, are starting to kind of grow weary.
His
antics.
Again, it's expectation, isn't it, as well? And when you have got a player that the ability's there, and if they are inconsistent, there's nothing more frustrating as a fan than knowing the player's got the quality and not seeing it every week.
That's the thing. I think that there's a player in there. You've seen it at Norwich. He was ready to get big money moves.
Yeah.
And I think I've always said if he concentrates on his football rather than his followers, I think you could see a totally different Todd Cantwell next year.
I think so, yeah. And I do also think that Clement is the sort of manager he needs, like, just from the impressions I get of Clement and the job he's done so far, someone that will just narrow, like, kind of hone in on that a little bit with him. And if he can get a fit and firing Cantwell, then that could be crucial as well, because, as we said, there's a player in there. I really like Tom Lawrence as a player as well, I think, to be honest. I think his injuries are a bit unfortunate for Rangers, but when he's on his game, I think he's a really good player. So there's a lot of really good players in there that must just be so frustrating for Rangers fans, given the injuries and just inconsistencies. If they can find the consistencies, that is the difference between them and Celtic, really, isn't it? When you've got a player like Matt O'Reilly, for example, who could be a Cantwell type if he wanted to, he's that similar style of player. He's capable of the brilliant. He could, early in his season maybe drop off, not be. He's turned his game into something, and it's all about consistency. Every week with O'Reilly, he's unbelievable.
And I think the fact, if he hadn't had that dip in January, he probably would have ended up taking the Player of the Year.
Yeah, I think so.
Kind of
I
thing.
think so, yeah. That wee dip for him was, that probably just took it away for sure. And Shankland, like, the season he had was remarkable, wasn't it? So, I think for Rangers it'll be intriguing what they do the loans you mentioned, but also just getting the players that they need to get playing consistently up to that kind of level. And it's usually at the top end of the pitch, isn't it? It's that kind of that top end of the pitch that matters most for Rangers, because I think defensively they've got a decent enough kind of group there that are fairly familiar with themselves, but sometimes they just kind of derail when it matters at the top end.
Yeah, and I think obviously we talked about Tony Docherty and the great job he's done at Dundee. When you look at players like Luke McCowan and Lyle Cameron, obviously, you know, it's obviously vital he keeps him for next year. You know, do you see them pushing on again, getting a top six? Well, obviously aim for top six, as every team does, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, where do you see the weaknesses that if there is any in the Dundee squad?
Yeah, it's
season?
a tough one, isn't it?
Apart from the pitch, obviously.
Apart from that's crucial. That needs to improve. I think again, similar. All the clubs at this kind of level fall into the same kind of category of it's who they can keep hold of for a start, but too, like the turnover can always be quite big as well. So I think Tony Docherty's proven that he's, you know, a really good manager and coach over the years, but it will be very difficult to follow up on the season they've had. I don't think there's any sugarcoating or denying that, because, you know, Dundee United coming up, for example, it's going to be another interesting season with them and their Motherwell under Kettlewell and Aberdeen, obviously, and Hibs. Like they're gonna, you would think these teams are going to be better.
Yeah, they've got.
So there's going to be a lot more competition for the top six, isn't there? So I wouldn't be surprised if Dundee did it. Can I see them doing it? My gut probably says no, just because there's going to be more teams in about it. But yeah, I really wouldn't be surprised. I think it's going to be a fascinating season, kind of for European and mid-table kind of football next season generally.
I think it's obviously the disadvantages of a team like Dundee with the finances aren't there kind of thing. So they've got to try and work clever. Yeah, you know, and teams down the bottom like St Johnstone and like Hibs will have to do the same for next year and try and improve. Stuart Kettlewell, obviously, with David De Gea of Scottish football, you know, in charge of Motherwell. A strange season for the fans because they started to kind of dip around October, albeit two of those fixtures came against Celtic and Rangers, and you know, although you were still getting results here and there, it was more the turn of the year that Motherwell really started to kick on, really started to get results. You know, Theo Bair and Blair Spittle have been absolutely instrumental in that success in the second half of the season. And as I say, what frustrates me, one of my big mates is a Motherwell fan, and that's what he says. He says he could be in that European place now.
I know.
Because if the split wasn't there, you'd be up there. Which is frustrating. But you know, do you think that the problem I think with Motherwell last year or last season was the cavalier approach of we'll score loads of goals, but they're also letting in loads of goals as well?
I know it has been a frustrating season, and I think it would be a frustrating season for no one more than Kettlewell himself. He's I'm really impressed by him as a manager and as a guy. I think he comes across really, really well. He's done a really good job, I think, generally, because during that slump there was a lot of pressure on him. And again, it kind of maybe what we were talking about with Hibs and even Aberdeen, axing that manager at that point. If it was another club, they probably would have pulled the plug on that and actually pulled the trigger on getting rid of Kettlewell, wouldn't they? Whereas they've backed him, they've stuck with him, and I think credit has to go there because they've come through that rocky patch because they started the season so well, and I think they've got the ability to be a really, really good team. Theo Bair, phenomenal season. What worries me most for Motherwell is that the loss of Blair Spittle when he moves on, because
I think that will be massive.
What a player, massive. And how you replace him, that's the biggest question. Some really good signings in there though, like Sam Nicholson, for example, I thought was a good signing. So how Motherwell can go into this summer recruitment wise, make some of these lads permanent, get more loans and whatever it may be. People like Georgie Gent, like on loan these guys. It's interesting what sort of shape Motherwell will be in come the start of next season, because the turnover is always pretty big, but particularly with Spittle going, that's a real sucker punch. So a frustrating season all round, but ending fairly positively up until St Johnstone on the final day. Will hopefully mean that Motherwell will come in with a bit of momentum going into next season and no European football like they've had in some seasons, which again similar to Aberdeen through Motherwell in parts.
Yeah, and when you look at for me, I think a great signing for Motherwell would be somebody like Simon Murray.
Yeah,
from Ross County. I think he'd fit in really well.
Yeah,
into that team. When you look at the goals he's scored, obviously for Ross County, and considering they're down at the bottom,
and he's that type of player as well that I think would just fit for Motherwell, wouldn't he? Like he's a hard worker, a grafter. He presses from the front really well, and he could complement someone like Theo Bair, you know. So I've been impressed with Simon Murray this season. And I think that's the kind of market that Motherwell will need to look in, is players that are either going down or coming up from the Championship, whatever it may be, players that have impressed at that level. And then obviously kind of lower leagues down south have always been pools of fish then, I feel like. So, yeah, be really intriguing to see who they bring in. Generally, all these kind of clubs down here, they're going to have massive summers. They always do. Yeah. So someone like Simon Murray, if County were to go down, I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a few suitors in the top flight that would be ready to pounce.
Yeah, and St Johnstone's a team that's had a turbulent season like Ross County. You know, they survived on the last day by the skin of their teeth. When you look at I know a lot of the fans rather, will be disappointed during the season when maybe they've been losing 1-0 or 2-1 and urging their team to go forward and get an equaliser. And that, I think that's the difference. I think that's where almost, whether it's intentional or not, but it's almost that intention of, if we go up and try and get an equaliser, you lose a third goal, then the goals start to rack up against you. You lose more goals. So obviously it's probably worked out well for St Johnstone when you look at the fact that they've survived just 4 goals. Yeah,
I know. Yeah, it has worked out. Yeah, and it's strange as well because I almost feel like because St Johnstone had so much success that just jealous as a Motherwell fan that we've not won a trophy in a long time. But it's almost like, because of all that, you would probably expect them to have a couple of seasons of maybe kind of the polar opposite feeling. But St Johnstone, every season their ambition will be just to stay up, ultimately. Like, they can't be expecting to be pushing for Europe all the time. Like, even Motherwell, St Johnstone, all these clubs, even Dundee and St Mirren moving into next season, I would say, are all clubs that would probably look at and go, safety is first and foremost because of how competitive a league it is. But it's worked out for St Johnstone, like you say, on goal difference in the end. But I think it's pretty much job done. That's all that Craig Levein would have been asked to do, is get them safe. And
just relief.
Whether you do it by the final few minutes or whatever, it doesn't really matter, does it? It's relief, and St Johnstone will be around for another season next season. You kind of will naturally worry a little bit for St Johnstone next season, I think, because just of how poor they had been this season. Let's not shy away from that. So again, it comes back to recruitment. It comes back to how they'll kick on from here. But you would be a little bit worried, I think, for St Johnstone next season, I think.
Do you think the hierarchy will look to somewhere else apart from Craig Levein? Do you think he'll be in charge and he'll give him another year to...
Yeah, hard to know, actually. I mean, Craig Levein's obviously a hugely experienced manager, you know, really, really... That could be a really, really shrewd appointment, but it all comes down to what money he's got to work with, what recruitment, what players he can... That's a manager's only as good as their players. Whether Levein, I don't know the detail, but if he would have had like a clause in his contract that triggered something, if he's kept them up, maybe that he'll stay in, I don't know. But I think they'll stick with him because he's done the job that he's been asked to do, really. But again, it'll be intriguing to see what he can do with a kind of full pre-season and go from there, because as I said, there's a really good manager in Craig Levein. He's had success in the past, so I think he's got the ability to go on and do that again for sure now.
Yeah, and when you look at obviously Ross County, they're now in a Premiership playoff final for the second year in a row. You know, they beat Partick Thistle in penalties last year. It was a fantastic two legs.
Unbelievable, wasn't it?
Fantastic two legs. It was drama right up to the end. You know, Don Cowie took over from Derek Adams. A lot was made of Derek when he came back up for England, and the kind of comments post-match and pre-match about Scottish football. Do you think that was almost kind of a lot of fans turned against him, almost as if to go...
Yeah, I think a lot of fans... I think a lot of his players will have turned against him as well. I could not believe what I was hearing at times, purely from, you know, see if you're a pundit or something like that, great, give us your thoughts, because the more controversial, the better for, you know, for broadcasters and stuff. They'll want to hear these kind of hot takes. But see if you're a manager trying to get your players on side.
Yeah.
What a bizarre approach. Like, I could not believe it. I just pictured being like, if I was one of his players, I'd be like, what?
Yeah,
I'm not playing for this guy.
You're just in the door and you've absolutely destroyed.
And it's no coincidence that the results completely bombed, and he was gone within a few weeks because there was no winning them back. There was no winning the fans back, and I just could not believe it. A massive oversight from Derek Adams to say what he said and do what he did. But it was, you get away with it if you do it once and you can just say I was emotional, I was angry. But he did it
you're
too
trying
many
to get
times.
A reaction at your players, almost reverse psychology. Exactly. But as you say, he kept
just doing it and saying things that you were like, nah.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think
crazy.
Like Ross County, like Hibs, a managerial merry-go-round. They've had 3 managers this year. Don Cowie's now in charge.
Yeah.
In terms of how do you see the playoff final where Raith Rovers gone, they've had a great season in the Championship, and they'll be really gutted that they've not pipped Dundee United because they had so many chances.
No, they really did
to stretch ahead.
They did, didn't they? And it looked almost in the end like it was semi-comfortable for Dundee United, but it wasn't, was it? Wraith probably, like you say, they'll be gutted because there were opportunities there. But United maybe just let the door open a little bit, and they didn't.
Maybe inexperience, maybe
probably, a little bit. I think being that close in a kind of title run for a team like Wraith would have been a bit inexperienced. United, they're a Premiership team. Let's not beat around the bush. The players they've got, their recruitment, the money they've got for a start. Look at that squad. That's a team that's good enough to be in the top flight. So they've been there and done it before. Wraith, like you say, they're a good enough team to be in the top flight. Absolutely. For me, the thing is that the setup of the playoffs, it does just favour the Premiership team, doesn't it? In the sense that they go straight into the final 2-leg game, off you go. Whereas, Wraith have only had to overcome Thistle over 2 legs, but it's still that bit more football that's needing played to get there, and it's a big task. But my gut says County will probably just do it again. Just I think with the kind of quality they've got, like you say, Simon Murray.
Yeah.
Top end of the pitch. Danda, I think, terrific player. They've just got quality that can hurt you. But I would not be surprised whatsoever if Wraith were to do it, because they would certainly deserve it given the season they've had, wouldn't they, to be coming up. So really can't wait for it again. I don't think it'll be quite as dramatic as last season though. That was unbelievable.
Again, to be fair.
Right. If it can be better than that, then we're all winners. But that was an unbelievable playoff, wasn't it?
Do you think the playoff structure is maybe too long for Championship?
I know the
league finishes early and therefore it balances itself out. But do you think it's maybe too long for teams in terms of a quarter final, a semi final, and these are all 2 legs?
I think the 2-legged part of it is just too much.
Yeah,
my own opinion on that, and I'm sure everyone's opinions will be different. But I would much rather it just be a one-off game at a neutral ground. And obviously I'm not saying that needs to be at Hampden, because these stadiums aren't going to get filled out, but it's an opportunity to take the games around the country a little bit, take in other stadiums, something like that. I think could be really something different, and fans do love an away day to a neutral ground, don't they? These teams aren't going to get finals often, they're not going to get to cup finals and stuff often, so when you're at that level and you can get to a playoff final and get to a neutral ground, that'd be brilliant, I think. But obviously there's reasons for and against it, but I think it'd be better just to do it single game. Yeah,
so in terms of players, obviously that's then stood out, apart from obviously the obvious Lauren Shankland, who won the PFA Player of the Year, a Premiership Player of the Year award. Incidentally, the first player since 2012, I think, Michael Higdon, was the last player outside Celtic Rangers to win it. That was incredible. Before that, I think it was 1989, possibly. So it's incredible to think that. But who else for you has stood out in the Scottish Premiership this year?
I think the guys that were nominated, like Butland and O'Reilly, of course, are obvious ones to say. But I think there's been a few. I think we touched on Marley Watkins at Kelly, for example. They've had some real standout players. Kelly, Lewis Mayo's been terrific defensively, but I think Theo Bair as well. Like, for a team like Motherwell to have a goal scorer like that, and Blair Spittle, the two of them have been so good. It's just the inconsistencies with them. But for me, it does go back to that Celtic team in terms of, Shankland's the standout in the league. I would agree with that. But O'Reilly has been so good, hasn't he? And he couldn't be in for the running because he probably missed too many games. But when Carter Vickers plays for Celtic, I think, is still the reason that they are kind of that level above at the minute. He's so important for them. I think Kerr has to go with someone like Scales, who's done really well with and without him at points, and probably surprised a lot of people as well. But I think when he plays, Carter Vickers is one of the best players in the division for sure. But in terms of standouts, yeah, O'Reilly and Butland, two class standouts and had great seasons.
Yeah, in terms of just predictions, I'm going to push you for predictions.
Go for it.
Raith Rovers and Ross County playoff final, 2 legs. Who do you see?
I can just see County getting the job done, I think, to be honest. What the score might be, who knows, but I think it will go County's way, so I'll tip them, I think.
Yeah, and obviously the big one is Saturday, Celtic Rangers Cup final. Do you see it lasting the full 120 plus minutes?
I wouldn't be surprised to see it go the distance for sure, but I think I touched on it again. When it comes to these kind of occasions, my gut always just seems to go towards Celtic, and that's obviously just purely because of what you see in season after season after season of late. They just have that knack, and for me, it stems from the guy in the middle of the pitch, Callum McGregor. Yeah. So with him on song and Celtic playing the way they are now, they're hitting form at the right time. I think Celtic will edge it, but it's going to be a brilliant game. I really can't wait to see how it pans out. But it'll be fascinating. But my guess would be Celtic, but I hope it goes all the way to penalties just for the spectacle and we can have an enjoying game.
I'm just hoping that it's been as sunny as it's been, to be fair, because I've caught the sun a couple of the last weekends. But Lewis, listen, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks very much.
It's been a great chat. Obviously, hopefully get you on again soon.
I would love to.
Yeah. So that's all we've got time for. On Thursday, we will have Rory Hamilton, the voice of Scottish football. He's going to be on Gaz Meets, so stay tuned for that. But if you haven't done so already, if you get onto YouTube, check out the Let's Have It channel, get some great content on there. There's some great videos and podcasts on there, so make sure you subscribe. And until next time, guys, we'll see you later.